Many players will gear up multiple classes to be able to fit any role for a team composition. If it's your first character, however, you'll level them up and then go into the LFG tool and maybe see that no one is looking for what your class provides. That's why I think Harbinger is a great DPS to start out on for Guild Wars 2 strikes and raids. It isn't the best build to play or the easiest, but it does have the ability to play multiple roles with one set of gear. It has high damage over time, range potential, mobility, and lots of CC. While it isn't the best on encounters that require power burst damage, it does optimize the way it provides its boons to allies, so you can give high quickness uptime to your team while not sacrificing your damage output. So the Condition Harbinger should ideally be played as a Quickness DPS, because it gets the most value from that. However, it doesn't require any extra boon duration from gear to play the Quickness variant, allowing you to swap a few skills and traits and specialize into a purely DPS role. This means you can join an LFG looking for a Quickness DPS or a pure DPS and swap a couple traits and skills accordingly. So here is my guide to playing the Condition Harbinger. Go for full Viper's stats and the Rune of Tormenting. Torment is your main damage source by far, so this rune is the most value, but you could also go for the Nightmare rune if you wanted to. To get to 100% Torment, you're going to need a little bit more, so on the Quickness variant, you want to eat the Meaty Asparagus Skewers, and on the full DPS variant, eat the Koi Cakes. Take a Scepter and Pistol with the Sigil of Earth, and then take a Dagger offhand with the Sigil of Torment, which will be used as the offhand for both weapon sets. For traits, Curses and Soul Reaping provide the most damage. Your Corruption skills, mostly Blood is Power, will put conditions on you. You need to cast your Dagger 4 or go into Shroud after using Blood is Power to transfer those conditions from you to the target. While Doomfire looks like the best option, the burning it provides only accounts for around 1k of your total DPS because you don't auto attack in Shroud that often. Eternal Life gives you much more Shroud generation, allowing you to stay in Shroud longer, which is where you deal the most damage. In general, the decision here doesn't make much of a difference in damage, but in situations where you can't perform your rotation uninterrupted, it ensures you have enough Shroud to make use of it when the cooldown is ready, so it performs better in more involved fights. On the Quickness variant, it allows you to provide more quickness to your allies so that you don't need to invest in boon duration, because the Harbinger Grandmaster trait will pulse quickness periodically to allies whenever you're in Shroud. Take the Elixir sharing trait to keep up boons on your team with the Quickness variant, but you do not need to take the cooldown reduction trait for elixirs, because the damage that you get from Septic Corruption is going to be a lot better, and your elixir cooldown is not going to be used as soon as it's ready anyways. You gain Blight over time by staying in Shroud or by casting your elixirs at your feet. Blight lowers your maximum health but gives you more damage modifiers, so you should always use your elixirs first to gain those damage modifiers. Each stack of Blight lasts for 25 seconds. When you enter Shroud, there's a priority of skills you want to use. The 2 skill has the lowest cooldown and does huge damage when you can land all the hits of the shotgun effect. So always prioritize this because you want to delay the 3 and the 4 skills a bit. While they do a lot of damage, the 3 and 4 skills require you to have a threshold of Blight. So the 3 requires 5 Blight and the 4 requires 10 Blight. And if you use the skills with that threshold, it will consume that amount of Blight and give you that amount of Torment as well, doing a lot of damage. Don't use these skills if you don't have the Blight for them, since they won't do much damage, but they can be nice to use for mobility, especially the 4 skill, which has a Daze and Evade tied to it. Because you want to keep the damage modifiers, but you can't get more than 25 stacks of Blight, and because your Shroud skills use these stacks of Blight with the lowest amount of duration left first, the best time to use the 3 and 4 skills are right before maxing out at 25 stacks. This consumes the oldest Blight stacks and allows you to stay in Shroud to continue to generate new Blight stacks to increase the damage of the conditions you're applying. However, you want to deplete as much of your Blight as possible before leaving Shroud, because you will immediately pump up your Blight stacks again by using elixirs once you leave Shroud. When out of Shroud, use the elixirs first or save them a bit longer to make sure you can share the boons to allies. Elixirs do not need to be cast on an enemy to gain the Blight, and the damage they deal is minimal, so you can pre-cast your elixirs at your feet to gain Blight while waiting for an enemy to become vulnerable. Then you want to cast Blood is Power, transfer the conditions you apply to yourself with Dagger 4 to your target, use your Scepter 3 then 2 skills, and then swap to your pistol and use pistol 2 and 3. Because you will be alternating between weapon sets like this every time you leave and enter Shroud, you will be starting in a different weapon and swapping to the other, but the rotation works vice versa. Though if you plan to enter Shroud before you can use all of your weapon skills, prioritize swapping into Scepter earlier or delaying swapping out of Scepter to prioritize those weapon skills. If you have time to, use Dagger 5, but otherwise you want to enter Shroud as soon as it comes off cooldown. If you have any charges of Blood is Power, then use this right before entering Shroud so you can get Plague Sending to transfer it to your target. Then enter Shroud and repeat. The full DPS variant changes 2 traits. Take all the bottom traits in Harbinger and try to stay in melee range because your Shroud pulses Torment around you. Now that your elixirs do not share their boons, you can focus on using them whenever is the most conducive to your damage rotation, which is ideally to keep up your Blight stacks after leaving Shroud, as opposed to saving them to land them on your allies. Also, Plague lands instead of the Elixir Elite, and use that whenever the boss will stand still in it. For either variant, you can replace the Elixir of Risk for the Spectral Grasp for a little bit more CC, or the Corrosive Poison Cloud, which will give you a projectile blocking field. This is the Zhunlai Junkyard strike mission on challenge mode. With the Quickness variant, you want to use your Elixir of Ambition right after the Boon Rip, and this is really powerful because it gives every single boon to your party. And for example, if you have a Condition Alacrity Spectre on your team, then they're going to want to use their initiative first and then use their wells to maximize their initiative priority. But they're going to use their wells first because giving alacrity to their party first is more valuable than worrying about their rotation. So giving alacrity and all other boons allows everyone to have a more ideal opener, and I only have to use one skill animation for that. So it's a really convenient utility for your team to have that Elixir of Ambition. And for example, on fights like the Doom encounter, where the boss will strip all of your boons and you'll be split up, it's great for that regroup. You use the Elixir of Ambition right as your team needs to regroup, and then they're back to where they started and maintaining all of their damage. So it sees a lot of value in actual scenarios where your team has to do mechanics, and you may not see it be that good on like a DPS golem, but it is a very powerful elite skill, that elixir. So now we're getting the boss to around 75% where they'll enter the next phase. And in this encounter, there's quite a bit of condition pressure. And this build has a lot of condition transfer, not only just for the Blood is Power, but it's also got the ability to transfer on the Dagger 4 and on entering Shroud. So it has a little bit more than it needs, and I can take some damage here and then transfer it to the boss for some extra damage. And the build is going to be using our CCs here, so we use the Shroud 5, the Pistol 3, and now we're going to regroup with the team. This is an ideal place for me to use the Elixir of Ambition if I have it up, because we've all been split around and now we want to give out all those boons instantly. but I was in Shroud, so I was giving out my quickness anyways, and it looks like the Elixir of Ambition wasn't up anyways. Now I have Spectral Grasp, and I'm going to use it here when the Zaitan's reaches spawn, because it sends out multiple of these claws to spread out enemies, and what it will do is it'll try to pull them and then it'll chill them. So it does a lot of break bar damage over time to multiple enemies, and if you CC these Zaitan's reaches, they go away. So it's really good for this encounter, but for other encounters you could replace the Spectral Grasp here. But we have a lot of blight right now, and we want to use our Shroud, but the boss is going to do their mechanic where they're pulling, so we have to stay with our group. And I should just go into Shroud right now to prepare to do my burst. I've got plenty of blight, so I'm going to use my 3 and 4 skills and deplete some of my blight. And then we're just going to stay in Shroud for as long as we can using the 2 skill and the 3 and 4 if we get enough blight, because we're going to be able to get our blight back anyways from using the elixirs here. So we use the elixirs, blood is power, and we're going to go back into Shroud after we use our scepter skills. And I see that the crate are coming in, and while using the Shroud 4 here to move through the mobs is not, you know, the highest damage option, I just played safe and tried to get through as fast as possible using my Shroud 4. Now we've got a CC again, so I head over to the reanimated Spite with my Shroud 4 and my Shroud 5. We're going to CC this and then head back to the boss. Now my Elixir of Ambition is coming off cooldown, so this is a good time to use it because we've all been split up. The boon uptime is going to be falling off, so giving all those boons is going to give us our burst back, and we're going to finish off the last 5% of the boss. Actually, now that I think about it, it's probably not a good idea to use the Elixir of Ambition there, because I could have just saved it for the last phase. But it is what it is. So the last phase is a little bit higher pressure because we've got to stand in the safe zones, and we're going to be using the Harbinger mobility to handle that. And I'm going to precast my elixirs here because the blight from them lasts for 25 seconds. So it's going to be less than 25 seconds before we start attacking the boss again. So the precast there is going to give us some value on the cooldown. So now we're going to use the blood as power twice. And I go a little bit greedy by tanking all those elixirs, but I got a nice transfer off of it, so it could be worth. But we've got no blight here and a lot of shroud, so we're just going to stay in and use our auto attack and our 2 skill just to make sure that we give quickness to our team. I give out the elixirs now and try to land them on my allies so that they get quickness, because I really want to make sure I'm giving out the quickness. And you can see my quickness is kind of low because we didn't use the Elixir of Ambition yet, though it is off cooldown, so it would be good to use it now. But we've got the CC, so we've got to stay in Shroud, use the Shroud 5 and the 4 skill. And I'm going to use my Spectral Grasp here inside the mob to get the last bit of CC. And now we've got the Elixir of Ambition up, so we want to use that on our team. I go for the safe zone and use my Elixir of Ambition behind me to give my squad all of the boons, which will also help them kind of survive until they can get to the safe zone there, giving them some, you know, protection, resolution, just in case they've got conditions on them. And now we're going to try to we're going to leave Shroud here and do our weapon skills. The boss goes into the pull mechanic, so it's a really good time for me to be using my elixirs because I can't really interact with the boss during this too well. And the blood is power is pretty long range, but not long enough range for that. I go into Shroud and cleanse some of the conditions that the boss gave to me, and you can see that, yeah, this build is getting quite a lot of value from this encounter because of all the conditions that I'm able to transfer. I transfer all of my blight into torment, and I'm going to use my elixirs on my team here. So now the crate are spawning. I get a little bit of condition on me, and then I transfer them back by going into Shroud. And now I'm going to use my Shroud 4 as well, playing safe here. And we're going to get through that. Just staying in Shroud to give quickness to my allies, go into the safe zone, and then return back to the boss and deplete all of my blight before I leave Shroud, and use the elixirs to get my blight back. Get into the safe zone, and now the Zaitan's reaches spawn, so I use my Spectral Grasp And I'm going to transfer some conditions here. Now, the boss is at 7%, and we just want to keep up the quickness on our team, but our teammates kind of go down here, and the boss is at 4% left, and there's not really much we can do about that, so we're just going to stay on the boss, try to do as much damage as possible, and Blood is Power is going to go out here, and I've not gotten much transfer left, so I have to go into Shroud early here, and we're going to get the kill. So that's how you play the Condition Quickness Harbinger. If you like this content, then like the video, subscribe for more, and I will see you all next time.